So it's been small but perfectly formed, this little track, and now we're going to come into our final into the denouement. But it's a panel, so it's not going to. So you've got a bit of value, bit of chunky value, yeah. And so the panel we're welcoming back Mark Val of Photon. He's got enough points in his previous presentation to keep him going for several more talks. I think there's Sean from Hiber joining us. I think it's Kauppinen, but I don't want to I'm going to muller it properly. I think we have a couple more joining as well. We have Alexei Rantanen there coming in, and Teut. Teut, wait, I can't do. Everyone's loving my pronunciations. Teut. I sound like the villain in Goldmember at the moment doing this. Teut. I'm going to not say that again. But I'm gonna let him come in. I think is this our panel? We had someone come in and go out again. Then I think we might have.
We're all set. Everyone is here.
Who's in? Hi. So,
hi there.
It's a small but perfectly formed panel. Are you, Mark? Are you asking questions? I hope I'm not, because I haven't got any.
Yeah, that's right. Don't worry, we have a lot to talk about.
You've got a lot to talk about. I've got questions, but I probably not particularly for this. I think is Alexi supposed to be okay? No, so wrong. Alexi wasn't
the three of us here.
Okay, fine. Guest, almost had a guest in. Fair enough. I'm gonna let you guys crack on with it. You seem to be. I won't gonna mull a bit more of my pronunciations. I'll let you crack on, and I'll be come back at the end. But yeah, you're there. You can go as long as you like. At the end of the day, if you want to just keep talking, get some beers in.
Oh, we can do that definitely. I'm pretty sure. Thank you so much, Chris.
All right, cheers, guys.
Sean, Teut, it's so great to see you. It's fantastic. Thank you for accepting the invitation to be here today. For those who don't know both of you, I can say that both of you are legends, meaning that it's been a long time you've been in the industry, made tons of projects, but also saw many other projects. So instead of me introducing you, which normally I do in a panel, because normally we're like 5-6 different panelists, now we keep it small. So we'll let yourself introduce. So Teut, do you want to start?
Me? Okay,
yeah,
the old guy. So I'm doing games since I left school, 30 something years now. And I'm doing online games. I have no idea when I started. 2005 something. In the past 12 years, I've been consulting mostly free-to-play games and their companies in online game design and free-to-play monetization. I'm a kind of specialist in MTX, user experience, online game design, all of that kind of stuff. For more than 2 years, though, besides consulting, my main focus is on doing my own games with a company called Stratosphere. I'm employed there as a creative director. It's a company in Berlin. And I'm on a project called Homeworld Mobile. We are doing that for Gearbox. And we are doing 3 games in total, all free to play, all mobile. That's pretty exciting, going to hands-on development again for a couple of years. But on the side, I keep my my trusty long-term clients. And that's no secret. I'm working with Remedy on one of their projects. And some other things. My main focus, though, and my passion is online games, and not necessarily shooters and stuff, but like deep down MMOs. The more the merrier. This is my thing, where my heart beats. And due to my clients, I have seen a lot of games working and not working, hundreds of them. And my clients are big companies from Supercell, Jagex, Rovio, down to smaller teams, which are strewn all over the world, from Serbia, Russia, Ukraine, some even Asia, asking for my help. So I have seen a lot of things from both sides of the medal.
Thank you, Teut. And Sean, here you are.
Yes, good to see you guys. Teut, it's been a while.
Yeah, hi Sean, good to see you. You lost
good
hair.
to see you. I shaved and lost hair, yes.
Okay.
All the hair is coming off as we get older. When Mark said legends, I think he just means people who've been around so long that they've seen everything. I've been around for 26 years in the industry. My online stuff started actually back at Ubisoft when we were thinking about taking Myst online. That was an interesting project. It was going to be called Infinity, with a logo that was sideways that looks just like the new Meta logo for Facebook. So that was back in 2001. But my first online games were really with Sony Online, working on EverQuest 2 and Star Wars Galaxies. And then I rolled into Lord of the Rings Online, Warhammer Online, Age of Conan. Did about 20 something MMOs over the years in some capacity. Did some free-to-play stuff when it first started coming to the West out of Asia. That was very fun. Planet side online, so I worked in the online shooter space, worked with over 600 titles and studios all around the world. But for the last 2.5 years, I've been the chief strategy and marketing officer over at a company called Hiber, which is basically giving everybody the ability to make their own experiences in 3D using web technology. So anybody without the ability to code can make games. So big part of what we're looking at is multiplayer and how to get people working together. And I've worked with a lot of people, so I've seen a lot of things go right and a lot of things go wrong. So if we're telling war stories, this should be a fun one.
Yeah, definitely. And multiplayer evolved and at the same time stagnant through the decades. If we look at the end of the 90s and where we are today with metaverse, obviously. But let's go back in the past a little bit at end of the 90s, where when multiplayer was very, very novel, meaning that you were stepping in a game with other players and you were able to talk to each other. Back then, obviously, the reach of people who had internet was super small. Computers were, not in every home. It was there already, and a lot of learnings were done in those days that are still very much true today. So, I would love to hear your story to do like in the past and today, like compare how it was today and how it is now. And I guess on both development and marketing. And then we're going to dive a bit deeper into the various pillars or verticals of that field. So any one of you can start.
Yeah. I mean, you mean end of the 90s. That was Ultima Online, Asheron's Call, EverQuest 1. These were the first MMOs. I can tell you that I paid $1,200 a month phone bill because I had to dial dual ESDN into Ultima Online to do PvP correctly. That's how addictive that was back then. It was brand new. It was, very exciting. And the good thing is that the creators of Ultima Online basically spilled all their secrets on the conferences. So if you met Ralph Koster and Rich Vogel on, Sean, the guys, they basically taught you everything, how to manage online games and, what to do right. And if you dig out all these old presentations, as you said, over 90% of the stuff they said is still true today. The funny thing is that MMOs had a kind of death period. At some point it was no longer a good business to do MMOs, so they died in the West until the Asians basically swamped the whole market 10 years later. And in this 10 years, all that knowledge has been forgotten. And I'm a little bit ashamed that often I have to explain clients things Ralph Koster said like 1998 on a GDC, and they pay me for that, right? Becky is my memory they're paying for. And there was some really nice, interesting rules back then they established, like that 60% of your player base play MMO solo. This is still true today. People go into MMOs but still play them alone. That most people who enjoy PvP, who are hardcore PvP, actually have really civil jobs in real life, like they're firemen, policemen, lawyers, doctors, stuff like that. They're basically compensating, their way in games. A lot of other things. And they established a rule by accident that whenever you have 75,000 DAU, you get hacked the first time. And that's, I could predict my clients when they get hacked the first time, and they were like totally amazed when it happened. Stuff like that. All this really kind of baseline which hasn't changed until then. But the funny thing is that back then we were much closer to the player. We had forums where we basically answered every single question and thread. We had community managers handling them. We didn't have Discord. We didn't have all the social media things. I nearly said crap around it. And the number of people were kind of, you knew a lot of your players personally. Today, when you launch a mobile online game like we do, you can suddenly have so many players that a proper support is complete impossible. So we have to have robots, right? At some point, support was so problematic that some of the, let's say, old school publishers closed down their support on forums. Yeah, I'm watching at you, Electronic Arts, which is like, wait a second, if you close your doors, your users still will complain and ask stuff, but on other places you don't have under control. They're ruining like your reputation, and you can't do anything against it, right? Turning a blind eye against them is not what helps. And what I learned back then from the old games is that if you handle your consumers in a good way, you get it tenfold back. And even if you have bad news, telling the bad news open, honestly to your people will gain you trust and a much more loyal customer base than to actually lie to them or to try to hide it under a rug. So this customer relation thing has been kind of left behind due to the mass of people we now have in games. I mean, we're talking about online games now on mobile, which have like 1 million DAU. Daily active users, which is like completely crazy stuff. And that reminds me.
I can add, sorry, that some of the games today that are very popular will offer support only to the payers, and then everyone else doesn't have support. So
yeah,
that's another one.
Buy the starter pack and you get answer to your support. I think this is not good. There should be better ways handling this. Specifically the really serious problems, like I cannot log into my account, my account somehow is broken and stuff like that, so they can somehow restore that stuff through the game itself, or if the game never starts, and give the community a place where they can help themselves, all this kind of things. I remember when Ultima Online was swamped with support calls, they had players actually jumping in as support, even into the game itself. I forgot the name they called them. Sean, do you remember how they called the?
I think there were guides.
Guides, yeah. So basically, when you had a problem, you could raise your flag, and one of these guides, which was a player, tried to help you. The problem is that they tried to organize them so they had always guides online on all servers, meaning they basically gave them a certain time to work, and that was against American worker laws. So they got sued, and they immediately shut down that. Yeah, a really good idea turned to dust because of the laws. Maybe that comes back somehow, that players help players. In terms of development, back then we had to do everything ourselves. Massive online backend technology was a big mystified black box no one understood. Because here's the thing, we never had anyone talking TCP IP, or know what servers are, server protocols and all of that. We had no idea. So now we had to talk to people who were experienced in this, who usually worked for insurances and banks. So these guys we had to hire and educate them about games, and learning how these guys think. And Mark and Sean, that these guys are very, very different in terms of thinking and programming than, let's say, game programmers.
Yeah, that's right. It goes very much in line with what David was just saying prior, which is you can hire for expertise, but then in the end, culture is so much more important.
You know what?
Are you a gamer, right?
You know what the craziest thing is? He said in his talk about Valorant that they are running it on their own hardware racks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is like 2005 thinking. I had no idea.
I was Sony.
Hello, where's Amazon Cloud? And
Riot have their own network. It's called Riot One or Riot Now or something like that.
That's okay.
And they have their own pipeline, and some of those pipe cost 150 grand a month. But they have 20 of those.
But anyway,
you, Sean? I will let Sean talk a bit as well.
Yes.
And then we'll go back to
Sorry, Sean.
Oh, no. I think this is awesome because it's exactly where I think it's going to go. I remember when launching Lord of the Rings Online, and this isn't the beginning of things, but we launched Lord of the Rings Online. It was a subscription-based game. And then as the player count started to fall, we're like, we'll open it up. It'll be free to play. And then as the free-to-play money didn't really materialize because it didn't fully support the model, it wasn't built as a free-to-play game. It was a subscription game that they were trying to retrofit a new business model onto. Then it turned into, would you like to purchase premium support? So if you wanted to get to the top of the queue, and this was 10 years ago. So if you think about how things have evolved, that's not a new model. It's just not a great way to do business, and your community eventually gets pretty upset with those types of things. But to tell an old World War story, I was working at 3DFX, working on Voodoo 3, Voodoo 4, Voodoo 5 hardware graphics accelerators back in '99, and I didn't know much about this studio out in Raleigh, North Carolina, but I got paired up on these calls with this guy named Mark Rain, and we were pitching together our story about how we were supporting this game called Unreal Tournament, which was just coming out. And I was like, okay, I got to check this game out. It's interesting, see how it works on this graphics card. And I went and I played it for about 10 minutes, and then went in the bathroom and threw up for a half an hour because the frame rate was so bad for me. I just couldn't deal with it. But back then, I think people were a lot more accepting of low frame rates and just the power that people have to work with, not just from the server side. I mean, I can run a server off my laptop today that's worth several $1 million if you go back to Ospec Systems terabyte servers in 1997. Like, oh, a terabyte server. Oh my God, it's $1 million. I'm sitting here in front of a computer that costs like $3,000, and it's like, that's $1 billion computer for back then. So things have evolved.
I mean, everyone who played Quake 2, Unreal, and whatnot were used to play and compensate for the lag at the same time, saying, "Okay, I'm gonna aim 2 meters to the left of this guy because it's going that way. I'm gonna fire, and then even if it's a hit scan, which means direct bullet, you're gonna hit him." So, yeah.
Or when you peeked around the corner and you went back and still got a headshot, although you were standing behind the wall, because all of that. But in terms of dedicated hardware for games, that's really old school. And then the cloud came and changed everything. So I was working actually at Ubisoft, where I met Mark, where the whole game was running on their own dedicated servers, and we changed the whole game to cloud services. And because it's Ubisoft, they decided to have their own private cloud and not using any other ones. It's kind of, Ubisoft doesn't like other services, and that was a hell ride to actually run this game, transfer this game from dedicated hardware, which was really expensive. Upscaling is easy, but downscaling is really expensive, because what do you do with the extra servers? Throw them away, sell them? It's not possible. So going to cloud was really, really hard. Specifically, in terms of performance, it's okay for the game servers, but the database servers really took a really huge hit. And I remember, Mark, you said, hey, you can run everything in the cloud, but leave the database servers on their own dedicated hardware. And of course, the programmers didn't listen. And the whole game was really, really shaky for half a year until we fixed it. But today, when you compare today, you have turnkey solutions. One of our sponsors is Photon, and we're using one of the technologies called Quantum. Mark knows that, and we're actually using PlayFab, where Mark worked before. Now he's actually working at Exit Games, which is kind of funny. So we're using Quantum as a turnkey solution because we need this synchronized, deterministic multiplayer engine, and that works. And then we use PlayFab for accounting and item and economy stuff, and that propels us. We have one backend engineer or two, and that's it. And the whole game runs on 2 people. So back then, we have to have far more. And these backend guys were really rare to find, and very, very expensive. So you were lucky if you had one. You better hit his name, no LinkedIn profile around, nothing, because people would love to hire him away. But today it's much easier. And the same with the front end, because multiplayer or MMO games were so special. You had to basically customize a client who is able to scale graphics down if by accident there are 200 people on your screen. Right, and normal graphic engines couldn't do that, stuff like this. And today it's just like out of the box Unreal or Unity, it all handles that. So it's much, much easier from a technology standpoint. It's much more complex now, as Sean said, from a business model. And I have been working into free-to-play since 2006. And back then in the West, everybody said free-to-play will never work in the West. And lo and behold, now it's dominating the industry. Still today, and still 10 years ago, there were big publishers and big companies not believing in free-to-play or having difficulties adapting it. And because free-to-play games are usually online games, it's basically a really good match. And I remember, I don't call names, but we had a game designed by free-to-play, expensive game, mobile, 50 people working on it, and 3 months before release, the big company decided we don't want this to be free to play and turned it premium. That's like, why? But it happens, right? So if you don't fully embrace free to play, you should not do it. And as Sean said, plugging it free to play into a game which isn't designed for it, doesn't work either. It rarely works.
I'll add to that just a little bit. I think what happens is when people set out to build an online game, they don't fully account for the costs. It's not just the cost of running your studio, not just the cost of, oh, we gotta pay the engineers and everybody to do these things. There's the services as well, but you also have to be able to model the fact that the majority of the people who come into your free-to-play game aren't going to ever spend any money. So they are a cost center, and you'd have to figure out how to model it in a way that you have enough people with a compelling enough reason to actually spend money that they're actually offsetting or subsidizing the people who are there, just as what we call server liquidity. Right, you need to have people there, otherwise no one wants to be there in the first place.
And there are ways to that, right? Either the non-payers is the content for the other ones, like in PvP games that works, or give the non-payers ways to indirectly pay, like through advertising or any other means. The terms of only a fraction of players pay is something which very depends on genre and on the monetization system you build in. Because I have seen free-to-play games with a 50% conversion rate. Half of their player base pays. And I have games which are very, very healthy, which only has like 1.2% payers, which is nothing, but they pay sky high. So both extremes work depending how you design the whole game. Now I lost this one thing I wanted to say.
It's gonna come back, Teut.
It's going to come back.
So you get something. You put veterans up on the screen, you're going to get loss of memory.
That's right. So tell me, Sean, like you said earlier, you've been through so many games on both the development, production, marketing. So in your opinion, what is the hardest part regarding building, shipping, maintaining a game, and then in terms of style, because you've been through many different style of game as well, and so people, you can wake up one morning and say, I'm gonna make a multiplayer game and go forward with that. Obviously, as we said in the past, was like, okay, you need a large amount of war chest and money to be able to do that happen. Today, it's much more easier. But we'd love to hear your stories on that.
Yeah. I think you start out with the idea of, okay, is this even feasible? Do we have a team that can really do this? I've worked with really small teams with 5 to 7 people who want to build an MMO, and they spend years on it, and they get funding through family or friends or things like this. And I think what they run into is they always underestimate how long it's going to take. They underestimate the technical difficulties, and even using services out of the box. It's still difficult to have people maintain them. Then when you get to the point where you actually have a game and you're getting feedback from the audience, the players might have a different opinion of how your game is playing than what you think. And it might have taken you a while to get to market, so it doesn't look as fresh and new anymore. So now, people start to take that personally. And I think the worst thing that happens is then you go launch and you realize, wow, we thought X many people were going to show up, and it looks like it's going to be a slower burn. So now we've got 10 reserved instances on AWS for ECS servers. And now we got to figure out how to ditch these things real fast, because I don't want to spend 50 grand a year on a server if there's nobody to fill it. So there's just all these things that you have to be prepared to deal with. And I think that unless you've been through it, or unless you can talk to a lot of people to figure out the challenges, you probably should think through it a little bit more. That's.
Do you have like a checklist or like warning flags before launch? Because obviously, like 50% of the work or more nowadays is after launch, and but it'd be great to put that on.
Biggest warning flag is when you ask a lead developer or lead network engineer, so how many people are going to be able to fit on each server, and they go, I don't know. That's the scariest thing that you could ever hear. It's not like, well, we haven't load tested it yet. It's, I don't know. Okay, well, do you have a plan to load test this? Are we going to go and put players on this and see where it breaks? Because you never know how people have architected things until you see how poorly they've architected things.
Did you do pen tests? Penetration tests, like security stuff?
Yeah.
But Sean raises a good point, and Mark, maybe the question at the end, it's too late to actually ask that question, before launch. So when I had the luck to accompany clients who introduced me in their product from the start on, I noticed that most of the mistakes were done at the beginning already. So they were asking the wrong questions. They made a game for the wrong audience. They didn't fine tune the game to the audience who should play that, because they had a different idea who actually plays these games, because they reflect on themselves. So that's why I'm a big fan that if you do a game, let's say a strategy game, you should have strategy game players in your team of the same age as actually your audience are. When you know your audience, you know what they expect, and then you can fine tune the game there. And then you have to measure how big the audience is, because if your audience is very, very tiny, which we now call core games, even on mobile, you have to monetize them better to make the same money as a game which just addresses millions of people. And that can be done if you ask the right question from the beginning. And then you have to verify if your answers are the right ones, meaning that you should do a rapid prototype as soon as possible with the right setting, genre, and minimum playability, and just test it. You focus group it, you know, this kind of stuff. And that lessens the risk of failure at the end by a large margin. And even, you know, I preach that, but even I do the mistakes that I think, I don't know, this game is exactly for the audience we're expecting, blah, blah, blah. And then this audience comes in and they say like, this game plays like a game from 1990. And I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm sorry. I just said, you know, this Becky, you have to verify your assumptions all the time. And the best verification is let players in as soon as possible. You know, just a couple. Focus group testing just takes 5 to 7 people. And then more. And as soon as you have something play-ish, like, you know, Sean asked his lead backend engineer, hey, how many people fit in? And he will say, I didn't test it. So the server crushes with 20 people, you know, so let 10 in, you know, let test 10 people your game all the time, 10 new ones every month, have someone who manages these people, gets feedback reports, you know. I remember at Ubisoft, they had a department called Games Lab, and this Games Lab accompanies every new product and makes focus group testing every single quarter, later monthly, and that's people in, etc. And their feedback was immensely helpful to you know, get you back on track. Oh, this is the game we are doing. And at some point, the feedback was so different, as you said, the players just are playing your game differently or having fun in a different way, that you're shifting your game to this fun area instead of doing the game you planned.
Yeah.
So
I think
so in the end, what you're Sean, so what you're saying is that the community drives the development rather than what your own
they don't drive
says.
it. No, they are your devil's advocate if you're on the right track or not. And yes, you're listening to them if they want something, but sometimes the community doesn't have the picture in mind where you want to go. So you have to always kind of interpret what they're saying, because if the community totally drives development, the game will be something the community already played, and then you fail. So you have to have a middle road.
Yeah, I'd say the other thing that I've run into a lot, especially with independent teams, is that because they're building a game and they think they know what the audience wants, they will spend so much time. Say you have a game and it's a shooter and you have 12 different maps, and they spend all this time polishing up these maps, and they really only need 4 or 6 maps to start. And then they talk about the replayability and how they want to build in a progression system. And then here's the super high-end progression system for people who've maxed out the level system. And you look at this and go, okay, the majority of the people who are going to play this, 90+%, are going to play it for an hour, maybe a couple hours. They're not going to be here for 7,000 hours to get to this thing. So if you spend 90% of your time on stuff to keep people around that they're not even going to hit, and have a really poor user experience in the beginning, you're really not making the right decisions to have a viable product. And I think that is one of the huge things people bump into, is they get so passionate about the part they want to focus on because it's what they wish the game had that they love.
That's exactly why the old school publishers fail in free-to-play, because they want to have the perfect polished product out before they actually just show it to the public. So what I usually preach to my clients is that in the beginning, they should follow the 20-80% rule. So every system should be present, but only in a 20% state. If it works, fine, don't polish it. Oh, that looks ugly, don't mind. The presence of the system is the most important thing. And as soon as we have all systems there with 20%, you let people in. And then you go to the 80%. And we all know that the 80% take as long as the last 20%. But because you have verified if the systems are working, you don't polish until you launch. You don't touch it. If you start polishing, hit their hands, right? So you're basically launching an 80% product, and then you start polishing in the areas which work and redo the ones which don't. And that's a much faster and safer method than trying to, this progression system, we have to do an end game rate system there, which takes 3 months to do, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, why? You don't even know if the players want that or go there, or, maybe they stop playing, all of them, after 2 weeks. So you have to verify that. And that's basically the way doing the 20-80% thing is that let users in as soon as possible, and then crawl your way up to 80%, and then let the masters in, and then you polish along.
I think one last thing on multiplayer, even just in the design, the pain and discomfort for players isn't part of the design. It shouldn't be like, well, we need them to stick around for this long, so we have to make the progression really slow, and they do these things. That's not fun. If it's not fun, it shouldn't be in the game. I mean, you either need to work harder on the parts to make it fun while you're getting to where you're going.
But Teut said you have to ship with 3 months content. How do we do that without grinding? Yeah. It's tough, shipping a game with at least 3 months content and without grind or repetitive content. But there are lessons learned about how to do repetitive content more interesting, right? And these lessons have been all engineered to perfection on mobile. So if you play the right games, you know how to do that. And that's the other thing, most of the stuff you want to have in your online game have been polished, measured by KPIs to the 1000th percentile by the Asians, right? So if you really look into certain game mechanics, look at theirs, adapt them to Western taste, and don't reinvent the wheel on everything. I don't say copy paste stuff, right? I'm just saying, let's say a progression system, like you said, how do they do progression systems in your genre? So take the good games, with a successful look at their progression system and say, okay, this is how they work. And players seem to enjoy it because they have like 1 million players. So, adapt the system there and don't reinvent the wheel. Reinvent the wheel where it matters to differentiate your game from all the others. This is the key to success on mobile, is that, you have to be different enough that you stand out. Because if you don't stand out, you have to spend a lot of user acquisition money, and then you can fail heavily, very hard.
And that's in the end, it's all about entertainment and providing fun, because if there's no fun, people are wasting their time, more or less. And then
fun can be a pain, there are anti-fun
Well, I was talking
trends.
about Flappy Bird earlier, by the way, which
Flappy
is just
Bird,
a pain game.
Dark Souls, Escape from Tarkov, there are a lot of games out there, Death Stranding, who have a different sense on what fun should be. So let's call them experiences.
So one thing that we touch a little bit there is more about like testing, QA, and all these things, and how do you leverage a group of people to test your game? So what I've seen as a mistake many times is that people, they say, yeah, I've tried my game, but they tried it with always the same people, the same group of people, and that's something to not do at all, especially in multiplayer, where you always need a fresh player to try it out and then throw it away in the basket and never to be seen again. And that's the only way really to master. So how do you approach, how have you seen that approach work and not work depending on the game style?
Yeah, mostly through open beta invites, right? If you can post up a page saying, hey, we're going to be testing this out at some time, you are going to need a kick-ass trailer, because people will be like, it's a static web page and they want my email address. People are somewhat resistant to that, but not as resistant as they used to be if they didn't think they were going to get something for free. I'm a big fan of promising some kind of founder's gift or a thank you gift if you actually use that email again someday. But you can get tens of thousands of users pretty free. Beyond that, I mean, you can work with different websites and social channels and even influencers to get your stuff out there.
But then you have to think about valid feedback numbers, right? You have to have a critical mass of users giving you valid feedback. If only 10 users say something, it counts nothing. And if you realize that less than 10% of the users you invite actually play the game and give you feedback, it means that if you need the critical mass of 100 people, you need 1,000 people you invited. And then you need another 1,000 to actually get invited. Now imagine you're doing this website thingy with emails and you're only getting 1,200 emails. What do you do then? We did multiple phases of feedback rounds. The first one was that Gearbox did a feedbacker campaign for Homeworld 3, and they got access to our closed beta as well. So we had like a couple of thousand people ready we could draw in, and we let them in waves. And as you said, each wave we had a fresh set on things, and a feedback. Specifically, if we change or rebalance economy or combat balancing, that was always good to have, a couple of hundred new people in. Once that was closed, we actually went into the beta program on Google Android. So you can, in some countries, you can play the game already and you use the beta services. And but that's, let's say, a little bit more chaotic because you get organic users. Yes, you can test user acquisition and other things, which is good because you can have wild users you didn't recruit who are not already interested in your topic, because otherwise they don't register. They're basically users, hey, what is this game? I just tried out, which is much more realistic in terms of numbers. But on the other hand, on iOS, we have test flight, which luckily increased the number of users you could invite. And there we do the wave thingy as well and, get valid feedback. And we divide the testers in the ones who play the game for a while, they're no longer objective. And then we have testers who played the game for a long time and who give really, really good feedback. And we basically use them as alpha animals. Whatever they say, we take a little bit more seriously than the masses coming in, because they stick around through all the pain to just give you really good qualified feedback. And the next resizing of the test base that we have like 10, 20, 50,000 users coming in, is then coming in a couple of weeks. And that's good that you have at least the potential to do that. And you can do that without leaving your office. That's the amazing thing, right? So all the way from focus group, 5-6 people, to a couple of thousand people. Hey, let's turn this knob and we have 1,000 more people tomorrow. This is like, I love it.
Yeah, I'll add that the consoles like Xbox and PlayStation both have beta programs that if you want to put your game out early and test it, they will help you with that. And you can actually get a lot of feedback before you go into that general release.
Yeah. And you must do this. If you don't do this, you already failed your main task to develop a good game.
Yeah.
So obviously, like it resonates through what we just said, which is very much about services and how to bring quality, but also giving respect back to the players. And so there's this triangle of having good community support and having good data and analytic, and then your gut feeling regarding what you will put in the game in the next update. So in terms of putting that up, how many, what would be the ideal size of a company to handle such a load? Because we see games going global from day one, and some are needing baby steps, taking first, okay, let's do the Western America, then Europe, and then Eastern Europe, and then Asia, and move on that way and grew the teams. So many people forget that. So what would be your tips and tricks regarding that field of work?
The first thing is that when you haven't shipped a global game yet and you are at that professional level, don't.
No.
I've seen companies launching a game and day one they had a couple of 100,000 people coming in. But if you look closer, I'm currently playing such a game, right? And it's the 5th strategy game. So they already have all the toolboxes, all the event managers, all the support tools, all the kind of linking tools. They already have that, right? They're really experienced. They have a global operation. So yeah, they can do that. But if you're alone, go country by country, territory by territory, if possible in the time zone you live in, so that you can actually do all the support. And otherwise, you should not do that. It's a big mistake to think, hey, let's turn this knob and just launch global. If you see that your audience is tiny compared to the market, you can basically widen it faster. I mean, you have the freedom to unlock countries day by day if you want to, but otherwise I wouldn't do that on a global basis. And you also said in terms of data and gut feeling and everything, right? I cannot insist enough that if you only listen to data, you will fail. Look at Zynga. their games they basically destroyed all their games by just looking at data. If you just listen to designers, you will fail. And if you just listen to customers, you will fail. So you have to find the middle. And that's the secret here. Like the data tells you what happens, but never why. Ask your designers, they have an estimate why that happened and maybe a fix, and ask your customers, they can tell you exactly what happened. So this is basically the triangle, which is really important, and stay in the middle and don't party with one of the ones too easy. The problem is that data is very dangerous because data is something people think they can interpret and read, but they don't have the skills to do that. Specifically people with suits. They think, oh, our retention dropped 1%. We have to find something. Let's do a daily login. I have seen my son playing a game which has that. Yeah, I have exactly this I heard. Don't do that, right? And data in the wrong hands can be as dangerous as having no data at all. So listen to your experts who know how to interpret data, please.
That brings up when you're talking about distribution, I once had someone in an independent studio come in who was an investor and say, well, my son was watching a lot of stuff on the YouTube. Why aren't you guys distributing this game on YouTube? I'm like, okay, well, that's not really a distribution channel for
your
games.
Most dangerous enemy is the son of your investors, really.
Exactly.
I have seen that happening, and everybody I talk to has seen this happening. So it seems to be a pattern.
My kid likes Fortnite. Why aren't you in Fortnite?
Yeah.
Well, it's a competitive game.
But which raises a big eyebrows regarding streamers. So we think about earlier we heard about Apex, but then what they did is that they took Shroud, popular streamer, and Dr. Disrespect and all these folks, and made them play the game before it was released, and under NDA and all these things, then use that flavor to launch the game afterwards. Obviously, it's out of reach for most of the studios that are indie or small. So how will we? How do you suggest to attack this point?
First, you have to have a twitchable game. If your game is not twitchable, you don't need that.
Yeah, if you're gonna go blow $1 million on an event to kind of do a launch like that, you better have $1 million for servers too. So it's if you do drive people to your product, you're going to need to know that you have the capability to run them. But the approach I've looked at is really working with the smaller streamers, people who have super dedicated audiences. Because if you look at each of the tiers of different streamers or influencers, the higher you get, the less their audience is even engaged. So you might have somebody with 50 million people, but there might only be 500,000 people that will interact from that person's content, even though many people will watch. Or you get somebody with 2,000, followers, and 500 of the people actually are very dedicated to do anything that streamer says. They'll try it out.
Exactly, matches my experience. So the larger the streamer audience is, the harder it is to actually convert all of these to your game, and it's actually too expensive because the conversion rate for them is it's not good enough. So you have to find the special interest streamers, and there are agencies who make a really good job finding these. I had a client who has a fishing game, which is very, very niche, right? But they actually went out and went to that really. I didn't even know there were Twitch channels about fishing. And they had maybe 1,000, 2,000 subscribers, but they went to 10, 20 of them. And they had such a dedicated following through that it grew organically and then it became really successful. So yeah, go low and mid is a much better recipe than just hiring PewDiePie and make a scandal about your game. Yeah.
That's right. So Chris is here now. So
I'm here. I'm sorry. It's really fascinating. I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying some of the terrifying stories.
We're not done yet. We're just in 2000.
Yeah, we're just getting warm up.
I know you're just getting started.
We have 15 years more to go.
We have to continue this in a bar somewhere. Very soon.
So we have a few questions, Chris. So why don't we finish with the questions and then
you can finish?
Yeah.
I'll give you one question because I'm getting shouted at by my team who want to go home because they're.
I wanted to tell one story. It's a Photon related story because
go ahead, Sean.
It was very fun. So I actually was working on a game and we were using Photon as a backend. Mark, this is before you were working there. You were at PlayFab at the time. So we're using this. And I'm taking it to a trade show. And I said, God, don't make me put this online at a trade show because it's like $150 for really bad internet. This is 4 or 5 years ago. So server engineers, they package it up, they test it in the studio. Yeah, it totally works. I get and I set it all up. I've got the clients all going. I get the server there. I'm like, crap, it won't work. And they're like, oh, let's see. So the CTO, who's in Sweden, tells me, hey, go ahead and set up the internet and we'll do remote login. Well, sets up the internet, does remote login. He launches the server, runs perfectly. Thing runs great. The entire show was awesome. The next day, go in, same exact problem. And I was like, oh my God, I'm having the same problem. So I call Håkan again and let's remote login again, thinking like, oh, Sean must not know what he's doing here. So we flip it on, it logs in again. And I said, did you guys test this without internet in the office somehow? And it's like, no. I said, Photon's calling in to get its token to verify that we have a license and that it can actually run even in offline mode. So that was a fun experience. So if anybody's using Photon and you want to do an offline demo, make sure that you get your token and it lasts for 24 hours.
Yeah, that's right. That's totally true. It's all about session.
So it's my fun Photon crossover story.
Cool.
Yeah.
Questions have gone. Oh, it's gone. He's got them.
Oh, look at that. Chris made it disappear.
Well, thank you, Tom. That was fantastic. I would love to talk to you guys. I have to, because we've got to bring the session to an end. It's been great. It's been really interesting, having a very different change pace, hearing some horror stories and some interesting insights as well about investors' sons. That's the thing to make sure you have invested that kids. That's the way forward. But no, thank you so much, all of you, Sean and Teut, and obviously yourself, Mark, and thanks for supporting. This has been really great. Been an absolute pleasure. If you're doing multiplayer, these are the people to talk to. Check out Photon. Go and talk to Mark Valley, knows it all. Read through his 7,000 words PowerPoint, which has got every detail you need. That's brilliant. That's a really, really, honestly, it's a brilliant starting point if you're thinking about your multiplayer game. I am, however, going to have to send you into ether. So I can, for now, you can go and continue in a virtual pub elsewhere. I'd have been happy to stay all night.
Thank you so much, Teut and Sean, for coming. It was wonderful.
Thanks for having us.
You're great, guys.
See you in January. See you in January.
Yeah, looking forward
in person.
Live.